My name is Vera Westbrook. I'm 28 years old and 7 days before my wedding. I discovered that my own mother had systematically dismantled every single detail of the ceremony I had spent a year planning. She had called every vendor and canceled the flowers, the catering, the venue itself. She had told my fiancé that I was damaged goods, that he was making the biggest mistake of his life, that I would fall apart under the weight of marriage the way I had fallen apart in college. On what should have been my wedding day, 200 guests arrived at an empty lot, expecting a celebration that no longer existed. But my maid of honor had seen this coming 6 months ago. What Rachel planned in secret, and what my mother walked into on that Saturday afternoon, changed everything I thought I knew about family, about friendship, and about the kind of person I was capable of becoming. Before I take you into the heart of this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone in your life who claimed to love you, but made you feel smaller every time you were in their presence? Someone whose love felt less like a shelter and more like a cage. Someone who used your vulnerabilities as ammunition in battles you never agreed to fight. If you have ever felt the suffocating weight of conditional love, of relationships that demand your gratitude while stripping away your dignity, then I need you to stay with me. Because this story is about what happens when you finally stop asking for permission to exist. Now let me take you back to 8 months before everything fell apart. Let me take you to the night Nathan got down on one knee in our tiny kitchen in Ridge Hill, Georgia, and the phone call that came 11 minutes later. The phone call that, in retrospect, was the opening move in a game my mother had been waiting her entire life to play. Nathan proposed on a Tuesday evening. There was no fancy restaurant with white tablecloths, no ring hidden inside a dessert, no string quartet playing in the corner of a crowded room. He simply stood in our kitchen, the same kitchen where we had burned countless dinners and argued about whose turn it was to unload the dishwasher, and he held out a ring he had saved 7 months to purchase. I remember the way his hands were shaking slightly, this man who built furniture for a living, whose calloused palms could sand rough edges into silk, but couldn't seem to hold steady when it came to asking me to spend my life with him. He looked at me with those quiet brown eyes and said, "I don't have a speech prepared. I just know that I want every morning to start with you. I want to hear your voice before I hear anything else. I want to build a life that has your fingerprints all over it." I said yes before he finished the sentence. I said it so quickly that we both laughed, the sound filling our small apartment like something warm and bright. We sat on the kitchen floor afterward, my back against the cabinets, his arm around my shoulder, and I kept turning my hand under the overhead light, watching the small diamond catch the glow. It wasn't a large stone. It wasn't the kind of ring that appears in magazine advertisements or celebrity engagement announcements. But it was real, and it was mine, and it represented 7 months of Nathan eating packed lunches and skipping nights out with his friends. It represented his belief that our future was worth investing in, even when that investment meant sacrifices in the present. For 11 minutes, the world was exactly right. For 11 minutes, I existed in a space where happiness was simple and uncomplicated, where love felt like shelter instead of obligation. Then my phone rang. I saw the name on the screen, and even now, looking back, I can recognize the small knot that formed in my stomach. Not dread, exactly. More like a preemptive flinch, the kind of muscle memory that develops when you've spent a lifetime bracing for impact. "Mom." I picked up the phone, still smiling from the proposal, still floating on the cloud of Nathan's words. "Mom," I said, my voice bright with the news I hadn't yet shared. "I have something to tell you. Nathan and I are getting married." Silence on the other end, not the silence of surprise or joy or even the theatrical gasp I might have expected. This was the silence of calculation, of mental gears turning. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was clipped and businesslike. "But Nathan, just where are you having it?" No congratulations, no exclamations of happiness, no questions about how he proposed or whether I was happy or what this meant for our future. Just the wedding, just the logistics, just the event itself, stripped of all emotional significance and reduced to a series of checkboxes that needed to be marked. "Where's the venue?" she continued. "I need to know now. I need to start making calls." I glanced at Nathan, whose head was tilted slightly, listening to my half of the conversation. He could hear the tone of my voice shifting, the brightness fading into something more cautious. "We haven't decided anything yet, Mom," I said. "He literally just asked me. We haven't even talked about dates or locations or any of that." "Well, you need to start deciding," she said, and there was an edge to her voice now, a sharpness that I had learned to recognize over 28 years. "These things book out a year in advance. Venues in this town get snatched up faster than you can imagine. I'll handle the calls. I'll start reaching out tomorrow morning." I should explain something about my relationship with my mother, because without this context, the events that follow might seem incomprehensible. My entire life, every decision I have ever made has passed through my mother first. Which college I attended, which major I declared, which apartment I rented after graduation, which jobs I applied for, which friends I spent time with. All of it filtered through her approval process, measured against her standards, evaluated for how it would reflect on the family name and more specifically on her. When my father died of a heart attack when I was 19, the invisible chains only tightened. She pulled me close at his funeral, tears streaming down her face, and whispered words that would echo through the next decade of my life. "It's just us now," she said. "You're all I have. You're the only thing I have left of him." From that day forward, saying no to her felt like abandoning a widow. It felt like kicking someone who was already down, like refusing to throw a lifeline to a drowning woman. Every request she made came wrapped in the unspoken reminder of what she had lost, what we had both lost, and the implicit suggestion that my compliance was the least I could offer in exchange for her continued survival. So when I told her that Nathan and I wanted to plan the wedding ourselves, that we appreciated her offer but wanted to handle things in our own way and in our own time, she went quiet. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. A long, stretched silence that felt like a held breath, like the pause before a thunderclap. "Fine," she finally said, and I could hear something shift in her voice, something cold and precise settling into place. "I understand. You don't need me anymore. I see how it is." My chest tightened immediately. The old guilt, the one she had installed like software in my operating system when I was still a child learning to navigate the world, booted up instantly. It was a physical sensation, a constriction around my heart, a heavy weight settling in my stomach. "No, Mom," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Of course I need you. I want you to help. I want you to be part of this." I heard her exhale on the other end of the line, a long, satisfied breath that told me I had given her exactly what she wanted. Not the help itself, necessarily, but the acknowledgement of her necessity. The confirmation that I could not function without her involvement. Nathan watched me from across the kitchen, his eyes following the conversation even though he could only hear my side. He didn't say anything, but I noticed the way his jaw shifted slightly, the way it always did when he was holding something back. He had learned, over the 2 years we had been together, that challenging my mother directly only made things worse. He had learned that the dynamics of my family were like a tangled knot, and pulling on any single thread only tightened the rest. I didn't know it then, but that phone call was the first move in a game my mother had been waiting to play her entire life. She had been biding her time, waiting for an event significant enough to warrant total control, and a wedding was everything she had ever dreamed of. A public spectacle, a community event, a chance to demonstrate her influence and her taste and her indispensability. All while keeping her only daughter firmly tethered to the orbit of maternal approval. 3 months after the engagement, my mother had taken over everything. It happened gradually, the way water rises in a basement during a flood. You don't notice it at first because you're focused on other things, and by the time you feel the dampness around your ankles, the water is already at your knees. First, she offered to make a few calls to vendors because I was busy teaching 3rd grade, because the end of the school year was chaotic, because she had more free time than I did and wanted to be helpful. It seemed reasonable at the time. It seemed like a mother supporting her daughter during a stressful period. Then she started showing up to vendor appointments without telling me. I would arrive at a cake tasting to find her already seated at the table, already discussing flavors and designs with the baker, already making decisions about what I would and would not like. Then she changed my contact information on the florist's account to her own phone number, so that when confirmations came through, they went to her first. She explained it as a practical measure. a way to ensure that nothing fell through the cracks while I was dealing with parent-teacher conferences and standardized testing. But the small changes added up to something larger. I wanted wildflowers for the wedding, sunflowers and lavender and baby's breath arranged in loose, messy bouquets that looked like they had been gathered from a field that morning. My mother ordered white roses instead. "For elegance," she said. "You'll thank me when you see the photographs. Wildflowers look like weeds. People will think we couldn't afford proper arrangements." I wanted barbecue for the reception, pulled pork and cornbread and all the fixings served on paper plates with mason jars of sweet tea. It was the food Nathan and I loved, the food we ate at the restaurant where we had our first date, the food that felt like us. My mother was horrified. "You cannot serve barbecue at a wedding," she said, her voice rising with genuine alarm. "Vera, people will talk. This is supposed to be a formal event. This is supposed to be elegant. What will my friends think? What will the community think?" I wanted the seating chart to put Nathan's family in the front rows, closest to the altar, closest to the action. My mother rearranged it so that her friends from the women's auxiliary and the church book club filled the first 4 rows, pushing his family toward the back as if they were afterthoughts. "These are the people who have known you your whole life," she said. "These are the people who matter in this town." When I pushed back, even gently, even in the softest possible terms, she cried. She cried right there in our living room, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she already had in her hand, as if she had come prepared for emotional combat. "I'm just trying to make this beautiful for you," she would say, her voice trembling with hurt. "I'm doing all of this for you. Your father would have wanted it this way. He would have wanted you to have the wedding of your dreams, not some backyard cookout thrown together by a daughter who doesn't appreciate her mother's sacrifices." And I folded. Every single time I folded. The guilt was too heavy, the weight of her expectations too crushing. I would apologize for questioning her, thank her for her involvement, and retreat into a smaller version of myself, the version that knew how to survive by disappearing. Nathan noticed. He didn't say much, but I could see it in the way he started spending longer hours in his workshop. He had built a small woodworking studio in the garage of our rental house, and he would disappear into it after dinner, emerging only when it was time for bed. Sometimes I would find him standing at his workbench, not building anything, just staring at the wall, his hands still and empty at his sides. I knew he was frustrated. I knew he wanted to say something. But he also knew that anything he said would get back to my mother eventually, and that would only make things worse. The turning point, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time, came during a visit from Rachel. Rachel, my maid of honor, my best friend since 8th grade, the person who had held my hand through my father's funeral and my college breakdown and every significant moment of the past decade. She came over one evening to discuss rehearsal dinner plans, the first official event of the wedding weekend, and she watched my mother rearrange the centerpiece samples I had chosen, replacing every single one with options that better matched her vision of appropriate wedding decor. Rachel didn't say anything to my mother directly. She smiled and nodded and made polite conversation. But later, as she was leaving, she grabbed my arm in the doorway, her grip firm and urgent. "I need you to trust me on something," she said, her voice low enough that my mother couldn't hear from the living room. "Don't ask questions yet, just trust me." I laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood. "What do you mean, trust you about what?" She didn't answer. She just squeezed my hand, looked at me with an intensity that made my stomach tighten, and walked out to her car. I stood in the doorway and watched her drive away, wondering what she knew that I didn't, wondering what she had seen in my mother's behavior that had triggered such a response. I didn't understand then. I couldn't have understood. I was still too deep inside the pattern to see its shape. 2 months before the wedding, my mother invited Nathan to lunch. Just the 2 of them, she said. A chance to get to know her future son-in-law better, to talk about family things, to build a relationship independent of me. I thought it was a good sign. I thought maybe she was finally accepting him, finally recognizing that he made me happy, finally understanding that our relationship wasn't a threat to her position in my life. I was wrong. Nathan came home that afternoon and sat down across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared 1,000 meals and 1,000 conversations. He folded his hands in front of him, a gesture I recognized as his attempt to stay calm, to choose his words carefully, to keep from saying something he might regret. He was always careful with his words, always measured in his responses. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his whole body seemed braced for impact. "Your mother told me you had a breakdown in college," he said. My stomach dropped. The room seemed to tilt slightly, the walls shifting like a funhouse mirror. "What?" "She used the phrase damaged goods," Nathan continued, his voice steady but his eyes hard. "She said you had some kind of episode, that you couldn't get out of bed for weeks, that you missed finals and had to be brought home." I stared at him, unable to speak, unable to process what I was hearing. Yes, after my father died during my sophomore year of college, I went through a dark stretch. The grief had hit me in waves, overwhelming and relentless, and for a few weeks I had struggled to function. I saw a counselor. I worked through it. I graduated on time with a degree in education and a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't a secret exactly, but it wasn't ammunition either. It wasn't something to be weaponized against me, to be used as proof of my fundamental inadequacy as a human being and a partner. But my mother had turned it into ammunition. She had taken a painful but ultimately surmountable challenge and transformed it into evidence of my permanent brokenness. "She said my daughter needs someone who can handle her," Nathan continued. "She asked if I was really up for that. She asked if I understood what I was getting into." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The betrayal was too large, too shocking to process. This was my mother. This was the woman who had raised me, who had fed me and clothed me and driven me to piano lessons and soccer practice. This was the woman who had held my hand at my father's funeral and told me we would get through it together. And she was going behind my back, telling my future husband that I was damaged, that I was unstable, that he should reconsider his decision to marry me. "What did you say?" I whispered, terrified of the answer. Nathan looked at me steadily, his gaze unflinching. "I said I don't see damage. I see someone who survived. I see someone who faced something terrible and came out the other side." Something cracked open in my chest. Not pain exactly. Something warmer, something that felt like the first rays of sunlight after a long winter. "She left after that," Nathan said. "Didn't finish her iced tea, didn't say goodbye, just walked out of the restaurant." 20 minutes later, my phone rang. I knew who it was before I even looked at the screen. "Mom." "Nathan disrespected me at lunch," she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "He was rude. He was dismissive. He treated me like I was interfering in something that wasn't my business." "Mom, what did you say to him?" I was trying to help. I was trying to make sure he understood what he was getting into. A mother has a right to know if her daughter is marrying someone who can handle her needs. "He's isolating you from your family, Vera. That's what men like him do. Carpenters, blue-collar workers, no ambition. He builds furniture with his hands. He doesn't have a real career. He doesn't have prospects." "My father was an accountant," I said, and immediately regretted it. Silence on the other end. Then, very quietly, in a voice that sent ice down my spine, "Don't you dare throw that at me. Don't you dare use your father against me." She hung up. I sat in the kitchen holding my phone, caught between two versions of the truth. My mother's version, where she was protecting me from a man who wasn't good enough, who was isolating me from my family, who didn't understand my needs. And the real version, where she was trying to make sure I never left, where she was sabotaging my relationship because any relationship that made me happy was a relationship that threatened her control. I didn't know it yet, but this was only the first step in a much larger plan. The rumors started 6 weeks before the wedding. I walked into Patty's hair salon on Main Street for my regular trim, the same salon where I had been getting my hair cut since I was 14 years old. Patty, who had watched me grow up, who had heard all the small-town gossip and participated in plenty of it herself, sat me down in the chair and leaned close to the mirror under the pretense of checking my ends. "Honey, are you okay?" she asked, her voice pitched low enough that the other stylists couldn't hear. "Your mama stopped by yesterday. She said things aren't going well at home." I blinked at my reflection, at the confusion I could see spreading across my own face. "What did she say, exactly?" Patty hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with being the messenger of whatever tidings she was carrying. Just that you've been struggling. That Nathan might not be the right fit. That maybe the wedding is moving too fast. I smiled. The kind of smile you paste on when your insides are liquefying, when everything you thought you knew about your life is shifting under your feet. Everything is fine, Patty. Really, I don't know what she's talking about. But it wasn't fine, because the next day I walked into Dale's Market for groceries, and Mrs. Brewer at the register gave me a look I had never received before. Pity. Pure, unfiltered, concentrated pity. "Vera," she said, her voice soft with concern. "Sweetheart, if you ever need to talk, you know you can come to me." I didn't ask what she had heard. I already knew. Ridge Hill has a population of 4,000 people. In a town this size, a rumor doesn't travel. It teleports. It materializes simultaneously in every coffee shop and church pew and post office queue, fully formed and impossible to contain. Within 48 hours, my mother had seeded every conversation in town with the same narrative. Vera is fragile. Vera is unstable. Nathan is a mistake. The wedding shouldn't happen. A mother's heart is breaking. I started feeling it everywhere. The sideways glances at the post office, the overly gentle tone from parents at school pickup, the way people treated me like I was made of wet paper that might disintegrate at any moment. I would walk into the grocery store and feel the weight of unspoken questions pressing against me from every direction. How is she really doing? Have you heard about the wedding? Do you think it's going to happen? That Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Don't react to anything your mom does this week. I mean it, trust me." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. What did Rachel know that I didn't? What was she preparing for? "You're scaring me," I typed back. 3 dots appeared on the screen, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Good. Scared means you're paying attention." She didn't explain further. And for reasons I couldn't articulate, for reasons that had more to do with instinct than logic, I didn't push. Something was moving under the surface, something I couldn't see yet. I just had to wait. 5 weeks before the wedding, my mother called Gloria Cole. Gloria, Nathan's mother, a woman I had come to love over the 2 years Nathan and I had been together, a woman who had welcomed me into her family with open arms and warm hugs and Sunday dinners. I didn't find out about the call from Gloria directly. I found out from Nathan, who found out from his mother, who called him at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning with a voice tight and careful in a way that immediately set off alarm bells. "Nathan," Gloria said, "is there something about Vera I should know?" Nathan put the phone on speaker so I could hear. We were sitting at the kitchen table, nursing cups of coffee and enjoying the slow pace of a weekend morning. But the tone of Gloria's voice snapped both of us to attention. "What do you mean?" Nathan asked. "Diane called me last night," Gloria continued. "She said Vera has a history of, she used the word episodes. She said Vera needed psychiatric treatment in college. She said she worries about her stability." My hands went cold. I could feel the blood draining from my face, could feel the familiar tightening in my chest that came whenever my mother's manipulations surfaced in a new arena. "She told me you should know what you're getting into," Gloria added, her voice carefully neutral. "She called Vera emotionally volatile. She said Nathan should reconsider before it's too late." I watched Nathan's face as he listened. His expression didn't change, but I could see a muscle near his temple tightening, the only tell in an otherwise calm demeanor. "Mom," he said, "Vera saw a counselor after her dad died. That's it. Diane is twisting it. She's trying to cause problems." Gloria paused on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, could almost see her processing the information, weighing it against what she knew of me and what she knew of my mother. "I believe you, honey," she finally said. "But Diane was very convincing. She cried. She said she was terrified for you, for both of you." Of course she cried. She always cried. It was her most effective weapon, the tears that came so easily, that transformed her from aggressor to victim in the space of a heartbeat. After Nathan hung up, he turned to me, and for the first time since I had known him, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't patience or understanding or even frustration. It was clarity. Sharp, crystalline, unambiguous clarity. "Your mother is not trying to protect you, Vera," he said. "She's trying to own you." I knew he was right. I had known for years, maybe in the deepest parts of myself that I tried to ignore. But hearing it out loud, in our kitchen on a Saturday morning with sunlight spilling across the floor, it sounded different. It sounded true. "Don't fight with your mom over this," I told him, the words coming from somewhere automatic, somewhere programmed. "That's exactly what she wants. She wants conflict. She wants proof that you're the enemy." He nodded, but his jaw was set, and I could see the frustration simmering beneath the surface. That night, lying in bed, I realized something that should have been obvious months ago. My mother wasn't just trying to stop a wedding. She was trying to dismantle every relationship I had, one phone call at a time. She was calling my friends, my future in-laws, anyone who might offer me support or validation outside of her sphere of influence. And she was running out of people to call. Here is what nobody tells you about weddings. The money disappears before the first dance even starts. Nathan and I had saved for 3 years, scraping together $18,000 from teacher paychecks and early carpentry commissions. We had skipped vacations and driven used cars instead of new ones, and packed our lunches every day, and said no to nights out and weekend trips, and all the small luxuries that add texture to life. Every dollar had been earmarked for this celebration. Florist, $2,200. Caterer, $4,800. Venue deposit, $3,500. DJ, photographer, rentals, cake, the rest filled in the gaps faster than we could track. Most of those vendors had a 30-day cancellation policy. We were now inside that window. If the wedding didn't happen, we would lose almost everything we had saved. I sat at the kitchen table one evening with our budget spreadsheet open on my laptop, watching the numbers blur as my eyes filled with tears I refused to let fall. Nathan was across from me, sanding a chair leg by hand because the noise of the power sander bothered our neighbor's dog. He was always considerate like that, always aware of how his actions rippled outward. "If we had to walk away right now," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "how much do we lose?" He didn't look up from his work. "Most of it." "We can't afford to lose most of it." "I know." $18,000. 3 years of sacrifice and discipline and deferred gratification. That money was supposed to be our start. A down payment on a house, a safety net for unexpected expenses, a foundation for the future we were building together. And right now, it was sitting in contracts controlled by a woman who thought my happiness was a threat to hers. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to hold back the pressure that was building behind them. "If I don't do something," I said, more to myself than to Nathan, "I lose the money. I lose face in front of 200 people. I lose your mother's trust. I lose." I lowered my hands and looked at him. "I lose myself." Nathan put down the sandpaper and crossed the kitchen to kneel beside my chair. He took my hands in his palms rough and warm and familiar. "You won't lose me," he said. "I know." "Then we figure it out." I nodded, but sitting there in the quiet of our kitchen, I thought this was the bottom. This was as bad as it gets. I was wrong. 7 days before the wedding, on a Monday afternoon, I was grading papers at my desk during my lunch break when I decided to call the florist. Just a quick confirmation, routine, the kind of check-in that any organized bride would do as the final countdown began. I had a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, a small voice that whispered maybe you should double-check, maybe you should make sure everything is on track. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. "Magnolia Florals, this is Dawn." "Hi, Dawn, it's Vera Westbrook. I'm just checking in on our order for Saturday." A pause, too long. The kind of pause that stretches and distorts time, that makes your stomach drop before you even know why. "Ma'am," Dawn said, her voice carefully neutral, "that order was canceled 3 days ago." The pencil in my hand stopped moving. I stared at the worksheet in front of me, at the neat rows of multiplication problems my third graders had been struggling with, and felt the world shift beneath my feet. "Excuse me." "Your mother called. She said the wedding was off. She was very specific about the cancellation, very insistent. We processed the refund to the original payment method." I hung up without saying goodbye. My fingers were shaking as I scrolled through my contacts, as I dialed the next number. The caterer. Miss Westbrook, yes, we received the cancellation Thursday. Your mother called personally. She said there had been a change of plans. I hung up again, called the venue. I'm sorry, Miss Westbrook. Mrs. Diane Westbrook called and canceled the reservation. She said the family had decided not to proceed. I didn't let her finish. I sat at my desk, staring at the cinder block wall of my classroom, at the construction paper flowers my students had made for spring, at the job chart with its colorful clothespins, and I felt the ground beneath me dissolve. Not crack, but dissolve, like sand under a wave, like solid ground revealing itself as illusion. I called my mother. She picked up on the first ring, as if she had been waiting. Mom, you canceled my wedding. I canceled a mistake. That was not your decision to make. Everything about you is my decision, Vera. I raised you. I fed you. I clothed you. I buried your father alone while you were away at college. This wedding, your wedding, it's mine to give or take. Something shifted inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. Something that had been sleeping for 28 years and was only now opening its eyes. No, I said, it isn't. I hung up. My hands were still shaking, but my voice was steady, and that surprised me more than anything my mother had just said. The room was very quiet. 22 third graders were at recess, their screams and laughter drifting through the open window from the playground, and I was sitting alone with the wreckage of everything I had spent a year planning. I don't remember driving home. I remember the kitchen floor, the cold of the tiles seeping through my dress, the way the afternoon light made a rectangle on the wall that moved so slowly it felt like time had thickened into something almost solid. I wasn't crying. That was the strange part. I was just sitting there, my back against the dishwasher, my bag still on my shoulder, staring at nothing. Nathan found me like that when he came in from the workshop, sawdust on his forearms and wood chips in his hair. He looked at me, at the position I had taken on the kitchen floor, and he didn't ask what happened. He just sat down next to me, close enough that our shoulders touched, and waited. 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. The refrigerator hummed. A car drove by outside. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked twice and fell silent. She canceled everything, I finally said. Every vendor, all of them. He didn't flinch, didn't curse or slam his fist against the counter or any of the dramatic reactions I might have expected. He just sat there, solid and steady, his presence a kind of anchor in the storm that was raging inside me. When? He asked. 3 days ago, behind my back, she told them the wedding was off. She told them I had changed my mind. She told them. My voice cracked. She told me this morning that the wedding was hers to give or take, that she owns it, that she owns me. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then his hand found mine, his palm rough and warm against my trembling fingers. We'll figure this out. 7 days, Nathan, 7 days. No florist, no caterer, no venue, no money for replacements. The deposits are gone. The contracts are void. Everyone in town has heard her rumors. Everyone thinks I'm unstable, that this wedding shouldn't happen, that Nathan is making a mistake. She's won. She's won everything. Nathan pulled out his phone. I'm calling Rachel. He dialed. Rachel picked up on the second ring. Nathan gave her the short version, his voice calm and measured even as I could feel the tension radiating from his body. Vendors canceled. Diane responsible. 7 days until the wedding. Rachel listened. I could hear her voice on the other end of the line, but I couldn't make out the words. Then Nathan pulled the phone away from his ear and looked at me. She says don't call any vendors. Don't call your mother. She needs 48 hours. 48 hours. What is she going to do in 48 hours? Nathan relayed the question. Rachel's response came back clear and firm. She says she needs 48 hours. Can you give her that? I looked at Nathan. I looked at the phone in his hand. I looked at the kitchen that had witnessed so many turning points in our relationship, from his proposal to this moment of devastation. And I nodded. Okay, 48 hours. That same night, after I had fallen into something that wasn't quite sleep on the couch, Nathan's phone rang. He was in the kitchen, cleaning up from the dinner neither of us had really eaten, and I heard him answer, heard his voice drop low the way it does when he's trying not to wake me. I didn't move. I kept my eyes closed and my breathing even and listened. Later, much later, he told me what happened. My mother had called him at 10:47 at night, her voice sweetened with false concern. She had a breakdown in college, she said. Did she tell you the full story? Did she tell you about the weeks she couldn't get out of bed? Did she tell you about the finals she missed? I had to fly up there and bring her home. I had to nurse her back to health. She can't handle stress, Nathan. She'll fall apart under the pressure of marriage. You'll be the one picking up the pieces. Nathan said nothing. He just listened, his jaw tight, his free hand curled into a fist at his side. Walk away now, my mother continued. Save yourself. You seem like a decent man. Don't let her ruin your life. There are other women out there, women who are whole, women who won't drag you down into their dysfunction. Nathan reached across the counter and tapped a button on his phone. Record. Georgia is a one-party consent state. He knew this because his buddy Marcus had told him once, after a contractor tried to cheat him on a job and he needed documentation. Is that everything, Diane? He asked, his voice calm. I'm trying to help you, she said. I'm trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life. Noted. He hung up. He saved the file. He didn't tell me that night. Didn't wake me from my fitful rest to share the latest evidence of my mother's betrayal. He could see I was barely holding together, and one more blow might have cracked the foundation entirely. The next morning, he drove to Rachel's apartment before work. He handed her his phone, the recording queued up and ready. Rachel listened. Her face didn't change, her expression remained neutral and calculating. When it ended, she looked at Nathan and said, "This is exactly what I needed." Nathan asked, "What are you planning, Rachel?" She tapped the phone against her palm. "Insurance, the kind your mother-in-law can't cancel." She didn't elaborate. And Nathan, because he was Nathan, because he had learned to trust Rachel the same way I did, completely and without reservation, didn't push. Rachel had told me to wait 48 hours. Those were the longest 48 hours of my life. I went through the motions of teaching, of eating, of sleeping, but my mind was somewhere else entirely, cycling through the wreckage of my wedding plans and the unfamiliar sensation of defiance that had taken root somewhere deep in my chest. I didn't know yet that Rachel had been preparing for this moment for 6 months. 5 days before the wedding, Rachel showed up at our door carrying a manila folder thick enough to prop open a window. She sat at our kitchen table, the same table where Nathan had proposed, where I had learned about the cancellations, where every significant moment of this year had taken place, and opened the folder. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to let me finish before you react." I nodded, my hands curled around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The day your mom volunteered to handle the wedding, 6 months ago, I started making backup plans. I stared at her. The words didn't make sense at first, didn't connect to any framework of understanding I possessed. 6 months. "Do you remember your college graduation?" she asked. I did. It was one of those memories that lived in my body as much as my mind, a collection of sensations and emotions that could be summoned in an instant. My mother had arrived 40 minutes late, held up by what she described as impossible traffic, but which I suspected was deliberate. She had started an argument with my roommate's parents over a parking space, raising her voice in a crowded lot, drawing stares from every direction. She had spent the reception telling anyone who would listen that my education degree was a waste, that I should have gone into business like my father, that teaching was a nice hobby, but not a real career. I had cried in the bathroom. Rachel had held my hair back, had handed me tissues, had whispered that my mother didn't define my accomplishments. "I made a promise to myself that day," Rachel continued. "I promised that she would never ruin another milestone for you, never again." She pulled out a printed contract and slid it across the table. Elmwood Garden Estate, a private garden property 12 minutes from downtown Ridge Hill, owned by a woman named June Whitfield, a friend of Rachel's from her event planning days. The contract was signed in Rachel's name, dated 6 months ago. A $2,000 deposit, Rachel's own money. "You spent your own money," My voice cracked on the words. Rachel, that's $2,000. You'd do the same for me. I looked at the date on the contract. 6 months. She had started this the same week my mother took over the vendor calls, the same week I first felt the water rising around my ankles. Rachel had seen it coming before I did, before anyone did. She had been preparing for the storm while I was still convincing myself the sky was blue. Nathan leaned against the counter, arms crossed, staring at Rachel like she had just walked through a wall. I couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell if he was shocked or grateful or both. I didn't do this because I hate your mother, Rachel said. I did this because I love you. I did this because I've watched her chip away at you for 15 years and I couldn't watch it happen again. I didn't have words, I just had tears. And for the first time in months, they weren't the sad kind. Rachel flipped through the folder like a general briefing a war room. Florist, Sandy's blooms out of Carterville. Wildflowers, sunflowers, lavender, baby's breath. Exactly what you originally wanted. She looked at me, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. She was available on short notice because I've been keeping her on standby. I pressed my hand over my mouth, trying to contain the sob that was building in my chest. Caterer, Big Jim's Smokehouse. Pulled pork, cornbread, brisket, sweet tea, mason jars. He owes me a favor from the charity event I organized last spring. He's bringing his whole crew. Nathan let out a short laugh, the first one I had heard from him in weeks. It was a sound of disbelief, of relief, of something cracking open. DJ is my friend Marcus. Photographer is my coworker Lena. She shoots weddings on the side and has been asking for more gigs. Total backup cost, $6,500. I've covered it. You pay me back whenever. I shook my head. Rachel, that's not negotiable. That's too much. You can't just... She moved on as if I hadn't spoken. Guest list. I pulled the original list you shared with me when you first got engaged, before your mother took over communications. 200 names, phone numbers, emails. I have a separate contact database for every single one. She explained the plan. The morning of the wedding, she would send a mass text and make personal calls to the 15 most important guests. Nathan's family, my Uncle Tom, closest friends. The message: venue has been upgraded, new address, arrive by 3 o'clock. She would frame it as a surprise, a last-minute change that would delight rather than alarm. And my mother, I asked. Rachel met my eyes. She gets the original address, only the original address. The room went quiet. I could hear the refrigerator humming, could hear a car passing outside, could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I also called someone else, Rachel said, her voice careful now, testing the waters. Maggie Coulter from WRDG-TV, the news station, local interest piece. Best friend saves wedding, a community love story. Maggie doesn't know the details about your mom. She just knows it's a feel-good segment about friendship and perseverance. I hesitated. A camera crew felt like a step I couldn't take back, a level of exposure that made my skin prickle with anxiety. Rachel read my face. You don't have to decide now, but Vera, your mother put this on Facebook. She made it public first. This is just the truth catching up. Part of me felt guilty. The part that had been trained since childhood to protect my mother's image, to smooth over her behavior, to make excuses for her excesses. But the other part, the part that had been silenced for 28 years, felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Sweet, clean, uncomplicated relief. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, Nathan breathing slow and steady beside me, and ran the film of my life backward. Every birthday my mother had made about herself. The year she announced her hip surgery at my sweet 16, stealing the moment I had waited for with a medical update that sent all the adults scurrying for their phones. Every achievement she had diminished. Teaching is nice, dear, but it's not a career. You should have gone into business like your father. Every boyfriend she had driven away before Nathan, calling each one not good enough, until I believed I was the problem, until I believed I didn't deserve better. And my father, the last thing he ever said to me, 3 days before the heart attack that took him away. Standing at the kitchen sink in the house I grew up in, looking out the window at the backyard where I had played as a child, his voice soft and thoughtful. Don't let anyone shrink you, Vera. Not even me. I hadn't understood then. I thought he was talking about careers, about ambition, about the size of my dreams. But lying in bed that night, I realized he was talking about something deeper. He was talking about my mother. He was talking about the slow, steady erosion of self that happens when you spend your life making yourself smaller to fit inside someone else's needs. At 6 o'clock the next morning, I called Rachel. Let's do it. You're sure? I'm sure. Good, I'll activate everything today. I hung up and made one more call. Uncle Tom, my father's younger brother, a retired army man who managed a warehouse in the next town over. He had been in my life since birth, but he kept his distance from my mother's orbit. A smart man, a survivor in his own right. Uncle Tom, I said when he answered, I need to ask you something. Shoot. Would you walk me down the aisle? The line went quiet. I heard him clear his throat. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Your daddy would be so proud, Vera. He'd be proud of the woman you've become. I pressed the phone to my chest after we hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. Here is what I did not do. I did not call my mother. I did not explain. I did not beg. I did not negotiate. For the first time in 28 years, I chose silence. Not the silence of submission, the silence of someone who has given up. The silence of someone who has finally decided. 4 days before the wedding, a Thursday, I was standing in the hallway outside my classroom at Ridge Hill Elementary, refilling my water bottle at the fountain, when I heard her voice. Not on the phone this time. In person, in my building. I'm here to check on my daughter, she was saying, loud enough for every open classroom door to hear. She's been unstable. I'm worried she'll have another episode. I looked up. My mother was standing at the end of the hallway, speaking to the front desk volunteer, her voice pitched to Carrie, her body language broadcasting concern and maternal devotion. Mrs. Patterson, the 5th grade teacher, stepped into her doorway. Mr. Gaines, the custodian, froze mid-sweep. 2 parents waiting for a pickup conference turned to stare. My face went white. I could feel the blood draining, leaving me lightheaded and unsteady. This was my workplace. This was the one space in my life that my mother had not yet invaded, the one place where I was Vera the teacher, Vera the professional, not Vera the fragile daughter. I walked toward her, steady steps. My sneakers squeaked on the linoleum. Mom, this is my workplace. Please leave. She pivoted to face me, and her expression shifted. The concern melted away, replaced by something harder, something that looked almost like satisfaction. I'm worried about you, Vera. You're not thinking clearly. You're rushing into this marriage against everyone's advice. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years. Please, leave. Mr. Gaines, the custodian, stepped forward. He was a large man, quiet and gentle, but his presence was commanding. He spoke softly but firmly. Ma'am, I'll need to ask you to step outside. You're disturbing the students. My mother looked around the hallway at the staring faces, the half-open doors, the witnesses to her performance. She squared her shoulders. You'll see, she said, walking toward the exit. Everyone will see. The door closed behind her. The hallway slowly unstiffened, the tension dissipating like a held breath. Mrs. Patterson gave me a small, helpless shrug from her doorway. Mr. Gaines resumed his sweeping, the swish-swish of the broom filling the silence. Then a hand touched my elbow. Mrs. Daniels, 62 years old, teaching at this school for 30 years, her reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She leaned close, her voice barely above a whisper. Honey, my mother was the same. Don't let her win. 5 words from a near stranger, and they held me up for the rest of the day. 2 days before the wedding, the rehearsal dinner at Gloria Cole's house. A cozy ranch-style home with a wraparound porch and string lights Nathan had hung the previous summer. About 30 people gathered, Nathan's family and a few close friends and Rachel and Uncle Tom. Fried chicken and potato salad and Gloria's famous sweet potato pie. The mood was warm, nervous, hopeful. My mother was not invited. She came anyway. I heard her car door at 7:15. I heard her footsteps on the gravel walk, then on the wooden porch steps. She walked up to the door carrying a bottle of wine and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Gloria opened the door, startled. "Diane, we weren't expecting." "I'm the mother of the bride." She stepped inside. The living room went quiet. Nathan's cousin Danny set down his fork. Uncle Tom straightened in his chair by the window. My mother poured herself a glass of wine from her own bottle and raised it. "I'd like to make a toast." Nobody stopped her. That was how she operated. She counted on politeness, on the social conventions that prevented people from challenging a woman raising a glass at her daughter's rehearsal dinner. "I just hope Nathan knows what he's signing up for." A murmur ran through the room. "This marriage won't last longer than her attention span. This marriage won't last longer than her stability. She's fragile, Nathan. She'll break. And you'll be left picking up the pieces." The room was a held breath. Gloria stood, her voice iron wrapped in velvet. "Diane, that's enough." My mother took a sip, set the glass down on the nearest surface, and looked around the room at 30 faces staring back at her. "I said what I said." She walked out. The screen door slapped shut behind her. I was silent. The silence wasn't emptiness. It was something else, something that had been growing in me for weeks. A quiet certainty, a refusal to be moved. Nathan's hand found mine under the table. He squeezed. I squeezed back. Gloria crossed the room and bent down next to my chair. Her eyes were wet. She whispered, "I'm sorry I ever doubted you." And then, quieter still, "You are welcome in this family, Vera, always." One day before the wedding, Friday evening, I was folding napkins at Rachel's apartment. She had insisted I stay the night so Diane couldn't reach me, couldn't whisper poison in my ear, couldn't manipulate me into doubt. My phone buzzed. A screenshot from my coworker, Jenny. A Facebook post, my mother's account. "Please pray for my daughter. She's rushing into a marriage against medical advice. I've done everything I can. A mother's heart is broken." Against medical advice. I read the words 3 times. Each time they rearranged themselves into something uglier, something more devastating. There was no medical advice. There was no doctor who had warned against marriage. My mother had invented a medical crisis and posted it to 800 people in a town where everyone knew everyone's middle name. My hands were shaking. Rachel looked over, read the screenshot over my shoulder, and her expression didn't change. She was past shock. She was in operational mode. "I saw it 20 minutes ago," she said. 800 people. "Rachel, she's telling the whole town I'm mentally ill." Rachel took the phone from my hand, not roughly, gently like a nurse removing something that was causing pain. "Don't respond. Tomorrow the truth will speak for itself." Nathan called from our house. He had seen it too. "I'll drive over." "Stay," I said. "I'm okay. I'm with Rachel." "You sure?" "I'm sure." He paused. "No more screens tonight, Vera." I agreed. Rachel took my phone and put it in a kitchen drawer. She made chamomile tea. We sat on her couch, not talking much, just breathing in the same room, just existing in the quiet space between crisis and resolution. I lay in Rachel's guest bed that night, eyes open, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles. Tomorrow would be different. I wasn't scared anymore. Something had shifted quietly, like a key turning in a lock. For the first time, I could see clearly, more clearly than I had ever seen in my life. Saturday morning, wedding day, 6 o'clock. I woke up in Rachel's guest room to the sound of her already on the phone. "Yes, ma'am. Venue upgrade. Surprise for the bride and groom. The new address is Elmwood Garden Estate, Fort Welve Whitfield Lane. Arrive by 3 o'clock. Don't go to the original address." She was packing her living room in sweatpants and a headset, a printed spreadsheet in her hand with 200 names, each one highlighted in yellow, green, or red. Yellow for mass text sent. Green for confirmed. Red for needs a personal call. By 8 o'clock, she had made 15 calls. Gloria Cole confirmed. Uncle Tom confirmed. Nathan's cousin Danny, his Aunt Margaret, the Hendersons from next door, my coworker Jenny, Mrs. Daniels. Confirmed, confirmed, confirmed. By 10 o'clock, 197 out of 200 guests had confirmed the new location. 3 couldn't attend. 1 had a sick child. 2 were traveling. None were related to my mother's sabotage. One person was not on the contact list at all. Diane Westbrook received no text, no call, no new address. As far as she knew, the wedding was at the original venue, the one she had canceled, the empty lot. At noon, I put on my dress in Rachel's bedroom. It was simple, ivory, tea-length with lace sleeves. I had bought it at a consignment shop in Atlanta for $60. My mother had called it second-hand embarrassment. I called it mine. Uncle Tom arrived at 1:30. He was wearing a gray suit, polished shoes, eyes already red-rimmed. He saw me and stopped in the doorway. "Lord Vera, you look like your daddy on his wedding day." "Stubborn and beautiful." Rachel checked her watch, checked her list, looked at me. "Ready." I smoothed my dress. I took a breath. I've been ready for 28 years. For the first time, my wedding felt like mine. Elmwood Garden Estate sat at the end of a gravel lane lined with pecan trees. There was a white wooden gate standing open wide. Beyond it, a rolling lawn edged with wildflower beds, sunflowers and lavender and baby's breath. The flowers I had chosen. The flowers my mother had erased. Rachel had brought them back. Fairy lights were strung between 2 ancient live oaks, swaying just enough in the afternoon breeze to make the light shimmer. Wooden chairs lined a center aisle. Chairs Nathan had built himself over the last year, one every weekend, stacked in his workshop where I thought he was just staying busy. He had been building our wedding without me knowing, contributing his own secret preparation to the day. The barbecue pit was already going. Big Jim himself in his denim apron tending the smoker. Pulled pork, cornbread, sweet tea in mason jars, just like I had dreamed. Guests started arriving at 2:30. They stepped through the gate and stopped. Almost every one of them stopped. Some pressed their hands to their chests. Some laughed in disbelief. Mrs. Henderson whispered to her husband, "This is better than the original." Gloria Cole walked in, saw the wildflowers, saw the hand-built chairs, saw the fairy lights catching the Georgia afternoon sun. She found me near the garden trellis and wrapped her arms around me. Tight. Real. "This is what your wedding was always supposed to look like." Maggie Coulter from WRDG-TV arrived quietly with her cameraman. They set up off to the side, unobtrusive, professional. Rachel briefed them. A heartwarming story about friendship and community. That's all they needed to know for now. Old Mrs. Freeman, my neighbor since childhood, 81 years old, Sunday hat and all, found me and took both my hands. "Your daddy is watching, sweetheart." I knew it. I believed her. 200 chairs, 197 guests, and the only person missing was the one who had tried to make sure none of this would exist. 3 o'clock. The afternoon light turned gold. Uncle Tom took my arm at the end of the aisle. His grip was firm, military firm, but his hand was trembling. "Slow steps," he murmured. "Make it count." The music started. Not a grand orchestral piece, just a guitar. Rachel's friend Caleb sitting on a stool under the live oak, playing a finger-picked version of the song Nathan and I had danced to on our first date. I stepped forward. 200 faces turned. Some were smiling, some were already crying. Gloria Cole held a tissue to her nose. Mrs. Daniels nodded at me from the third row. Small, steady, certain. Nathan stood at the end of the aisle. His hands were clasped in front of him. His eyes were red, and he wasn't hiding it. He had never hidden anything from me. As Uncle Tom delivered me to Nathan, he shook Nathan's hand and said, "Take care of her or answer to me." Nathan nodded. "Yes, sir." The officiant, Nathan's college friend David, ordained online the month before specifically for this, kept it simple. Short readings. No sermon, then the vows. Nathan went first. His voice broke once on the word home. My turn. I didn't read from a card. I looked at him and said what I had been holding for months. "I choose you, not because I need to be saved, but because I finally know I deserve to be loved without conditions." The garden went quiet. Even the birds, it seemed, fell silent. I don't need permission to be happy. Not from anyone, not anymore. Nathan's hand found mine. The officiant pronounced us married. We kissed under the live oaks, and the fairy lights swayed, and 197 people rose to their feet. The sound of their applause filled the garden like a wave. And somewhere, 12 minutes away, an empty lot waited in silence. At 3:15, 12 minutes away from the celebration, my mother drove to the original venue. I learned the details later, pieced together from Uncle Tom, from the security guard who had been hired to watch the property, from Maggie Coulter's footage. She parked her silver sedan, the one she always kept spotless because appearances mattered, and stepped out in a navy blue dress and pearl earrings. She wasn't dressed for grief. She was dressed for victory. She walked toward the lot. It was empty. No tent, no chairs, no flowers, no caterer, canceled vendors, an empty venue, her daughter's dream erased. In her mind, the story ended here, with Vera humiliated, with Vera crawling back, with Vera needing Mama again. Then she looked around. No cars arriving, no guests appearing, no confused relatives milling about, no one weeping on their phone, no one at all. The smile faded. She pulled out her phone and called me. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. She called Rachel. Voicemail. She called Gloria Cole. Voicemail. She scrolled through her contacts and called Nathan's cousin Danny. Voicemail. Mrs. Henderson. Voicemail. Jenny from my school. Voicemail. 7 calls. 8, 9. Not a single answer. She stood in the middle of that empty lot, phone pressed to her ear, turning in a slow circle. The sun was hot. The cicadas were loud, and she was completely, utterly alone. I try to imagine what that moment felt like for her, the exact second she understood. The second the smile dropped and the realization landed like a stone in still water. She had come to watch me break. Instead, she stood in an empty field, calling number after number, and no one answered. Someone answered eventually. A distant cousin of Nathan's, Bev, 74 years old and hard of hearing, who probably hadn't understood the "Don't Tell Diane" memo. She picked up on the 6th ring. "Oh, Diane, didn't you get the message? Weddings at Elmwood Garden now. Pretty place out on Whitfield Lane." My mother hung up without saying goodbye. 25 minutes later, she must have broken every speed limit in Ridge Hill. Her silver sedan crunched up the gravel lane at Elmwood Garden Estate. She saw the white gate, the fairy lights through the trees. She heard the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the smoky sweetness of barbecue drifting through the Georgia air. She parked. She walked to the gate. Her heels sank slightly into the gravel. A man was standing at the entrance. Kyle, Rachel's friend, 6'2", calm-faced, holding a clipboard. He had been briefed. "Good afternoon, ma'am. May I see your invitation?" My mother straightened. "I'm the mother of the bride." Kyle looked down at his list. He scanned it carefully, top to bottom. He looked up. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't on the guest list." My mother stared at him. Her mouth opened, then closed. "There must be a mistake." "No mistake, ma'am. I've checked twice." Through the gate, she could see the chairs. She could see the wildflowers. She could see the mason jars and the guests laughing. She could see the back of my dress. She could see Nathan's arm around my waist. Everything she had tried to destroy was right there, alive and whole and glowing. And there was a gate between her and it, and a man with a clipboard, and her name nowhere on the list. "I understand this is difficult," Kyle said gently, "but I can only allow listed guests inside." For the first time in her life, my mother was on the outside of a door she couldn't open, and the key was not in her hands. She didn't leave quietly. I pieced this together from Maggie Coulter's footage, which I watched only once, 2 weeks later, and never again. My mother's voice rose, first measured, then sharp, then raw. "This is my daughter's wedding. I am her mother." Kyle didn't move. He kept his hands clasped in front of him and his expression neutral. He had been trained for this. Rachel had thought of everything. "Ma'am, I understand, but I'm not authorized." "I gave birth to her." Several guests near the gate turned their heads. Nathan's Aunt Margaret whispered something to the person next to her. Mrs. Henderson shook her head slowly. My mother saw the faces looking at her, not with sympathy, not with confusion, with recognition. They knew what she had done. Rachel's venue change message had been clear. Due to unforeseen vendor cancellations by a family member, the wedding location has been moved. Everyone knew who that family member was. Then my mother saw the camera. Maggie Coulter and her cameraman had moved toward the gate, not aggressively, just doing their job. The red light was on. My mother froze. The tears, the ones she could summon on command, stopped. She looked at the lens the way a deer looks at headlights for one long moment. Then she stood there, the mask cracking. Not the grieving mother, not the protective parent. Just a woman in a navy dress who had bet everything on control and lost. She turned around, walked to her car, opened the door, got in, drove away. She didn't look back. Inside the garden, I was dancing. Nathan led me through a clumsy two-step on the grass while Caleb played guitar and the fairy lights turned on as the sun dipped. I didn't know my mother had come. I didn't know she had left. Rachel stood near the dessert table, watching the gate. She saw the silver sedan disappear down the gravel road. She picked up her glass of sweet tea, took a sip, and walked back to the dance floor. No triumph, no gloating, just peace. She came, Rachel told me days later. She left. You didn't miss anything. The rest of the evening was the kind of ordinary I had been starving for. Paper plates loaded with pulled pork. Sweet tea refilled 3 times. Nathan's 7-year-old nephew chasing fireflies across the lawn while his grandmother called after him to watch the flower beds. We cut the cake. 2 tiers, buttercream frosting, a small cluster of wildflowers on top. I had made the topper myself, 2 tiny wooden figures Nathan had carved the month before. He thought I hadn't noticed the wood shavings on his workbench. I had noticed. Gloria stood up to speak. She wasn't a woman who enjoyed public attention, so when she cleared her throat and the garden went quiet, it meant something. I'm not a speech person, she said, but I want to say this. Welcome to the family, Vera, for real this time. A few people laughed, a few people cried. I did both. Uncle Tom went next. He held his glass steady, but his voice wavered. My brother always said Vera would find her way. He paused, swallowed. He was right. The applause was gentle, not a roar, just a warm, even sound like rain on a porch roof. I sat at the long wooden table, one Nathan had built for a client the year before but decided to keep. And I looked around. 200 people eating barbecue in a garden full of wildflowers under fairy lights in a small Georgia town. Nobody was performing. Nobody was managing appearances. Nobody was watching to see if I would crack. For the first time in my life, a celebration wasn't being held hostage. Rachel caught my eye from across the table. She raised her mason jar. I raised mine. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. That was the first celebration of my life that wasn't stolen from me. Later that night, after the last guest had gone, after the fairy lights were still blinking softly in the empty garden, Nathan and I sat on the porch steps at our house. My shoes were off. His tie was loose. The night air smelled like jasmine and leftover smoke. There's something I need to show you, he said. He pulled out his phone and opened an audio file. Dated 6 days ago, 10:47 at night. I didn't play this for you before because you were already breaking. He pressed play. My mother's voice filled the dark porch. She had a breakdown in college. Did she tell you the full story? I listened. She can't handle stress. She'll fall apart. You'll be the one picking up the pieces. I kept listening. Walk away now. Save yourself. The recording ended. The cicadas took over. I sat with it. My mother's voice. The one that had sung me to sleep when I was small. The one that had read me stories. The one that had told me I was too fragile, too broken, too damaged for anyone to love, hanging in the warm night air. I'm not damaged, I said. I never was. Nathan didn't argue. He just waited. I want to send this to Maggie Coulter. He looked at me. Are you sure? My mother put it on Facebook first. She told 800 people I was mentally ill. She told the whole town my marriage was a mistake. I folded my hands. I'm not putting her on blast. I'm just letting people hear her real voice. Okay. And the vendor cancellations, the emails, the voicemails where she pretended to be me. Rachel has all of those. Nathan nodded. This isn't revenge, I said, as much to myself as to him. This is just the truth, without her editing it. He put his arm around me. The porch light flickered. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked twice and stopped. I'm not doing this to hurt her, I said. I'm doing this so she can never rewrite the story. The next morning, Sunday, I sat at the kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper and a pen. Not an email, not a text, a letter, handwritten because some things should cost effort. I wrote 3 drafts before I got it right. The first was too angry, the second was too kind, the third was honest. Mom, I love you. I need you to know that first, because the rest of this letter will be hard to read. You canceled my wedding. You told my fiancé I was damaged goods. You told the town I was mentally ill. You told his mother I was unstable. You came to my workplace and implied I was having a breakdown in front of my colleagues. You posted on Facebook that I was marrying against medical advice. That was a lie. I don't hate you for any of this, but I can't pretend it didn't happen. I think you're afraid. I think you've been afraid since Dad died. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of losing control. Afraid that if I build my own life, there won't be room for you in it. There is room. There will always be room, but not like this. I need distance. I don't know for how long. When you're ready to talk, really talk, without guilt, without tears used as weapons, without trying to control the conversation, I'll be here. But the door opens from my side now, not yours. I love you, Mom, but love without boundaries isn't love. It's captivity. Vera. I folded the letter. I put it in an envelope and wrote Diane Westbrook on the front. I drove to Uncle Tom's house and handed it to him. He read it standing in his doorway. When he finished, he folded it carefully and looked at me. Your father would have written the same thing. He delivered it that afternoon. I didn't ask how she reacted. I wasn't ready to know. 1 week after the wedding, Maggie Coulter's segment aired on WRDG-TV. The piece ran 4.5 minutes during the 6 o'clock news. The angle: Maid of Honor saves best friend's wedding after family sabotage, a Ridge Hill love story. Maggie kept it tasteful. She didn't name my mother directly. She said a family member canceled all wedding vendors 1 week before the ceremony. She showed footage of the garden, the wildflowers, the fairy lights, Nathan and me dancing. She interviewed Rachel, who said simply, "When someone you love is in trouble, you don't wait for permission to help." She didn't need to name Diane, but in a town of 4,000, subtraction is identification. If the mother of the bride isn't in the wedding footage and a family member did the sabotage, everyone does the math. Within 3 days, I heard the ripples. Diane's post, the one about medical advice, got screenshotted and shared across half the town before she could delete it. By the time she did, it was too late. People were placing it side by side with Maggie's report. The Ridge Hill Women's Auxiliary, where Diane had held a board seat for 6 years, sent her a polite email. "We think it's best if you take a leave of absence while things settle down." At Patty's hair salon, Patty herself told Diane during her appointment, "Diane, I heard what happened. I think you should talk to someone, a professional." Neighbors stopped waving from their driveways. Invitations to Sunday potlucks stopped arriving. The phone calls tapered off. My mother's currency in Ridge Hill had always been reputation. The devoted widow, the sacrificing mother, the woman who held it all together, that currency was now worthless. A woman on the town's Facebook group wrote what everyone was thinking. "I always thought Diane was a devoted mother. Turns out devoted and controlling look the same from the outside." I heard about the next part from Uncle Tom, who checked on my mother because, despite everything, she was still his late brother's wife. And Tom was the kind of man who didn't abandon people even when they had earned it. Diane called him on a Wednesday night, 2 weeks after the wedding. She was crying. "They turned my daughter against me." Tom didn't sugarcoat it. "Nobody turned her, Diane. You pushed her." "She's my child. I have a right." "You have a right to love her. You don't have a right to own her." She hung up on him, called back 20 minutes later, calmer, trying a different angle. That Rachel manipulated the whole thing. She poisoned Vera against me. Rachel saved a wedding you tried to destroy. Silence. Tom told me she called a few of her old friends from the women's auxiliary. She told them she had been pushed out by her daughter and her daughter's controlling best friend. The narrative was familiar. Diane, the victim. Diane, the misunderstood martyr. But this time, nobody bought it. Everyone had seen the Facebook post. Everyone had watched Maggie's report. Tom drove by Diane's house one evening and saw the lights on in the kitchen. Through the window, she was sitting alone at the table, looking at an old photo album. Her wedding album. Her and my father. Young, smiling, unbroken. He told me this carefully, like he wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. I listened. I hope she gets help, I said. I meant it. Not because I had forgiven her. Because I knew what it looked like when someone was drowning and too proud to call for a life vest. I told Tom if she agreed to see a therapist, I would go to one session of family counseling with her. One, that was my offer. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a condition. And it was the most generous thing I could give right now. The money sorted itself out, mostly. Nathan and I contacted the original vendors, the ones my mother had canceled by impersonating me. We brought the receipts, the emails where Diane had signed as Vera Westbrook, the voicemails where she had used my name. The florist and the caterer both reviewed the evidence and agreed we hadn't authorized the cancellation. Dawn at Magnolia Florals refunded the $2,200. The caterer returned $4,800. That was $7,000 back. Not everything, but enough to breathe. The venue, Ridge Hill Community Pavilion, had a stricter policy. No refund past 30 days. But the manager, after hearing the story and seeing the voicemails, offered a credit toward a future event. Nathan said, "We'll use it for a first anniversary party." I laughed for the first time in a while. We paid Rachel back the $6,500 within 2 months. She resisted. "Consider it a wedding gift," she said. I wired it anyway. Some debts aren't about money, they're about respect. Something unexpected came from the wedding itself. 3 guests who saw the hand-built chairs and tables Nathan had made for the reception reached out to him the following week. Custom furniture orders, a dining set for the Hendersons, a rocking chair for old Mrs. Freeman, a bookshelf for Maggie Coulter's producer. Nathan's workshop, which had been struggling for steady clients, suddenly had a 3-month wait list. I didn't file charges against my mother. I didn't sue for damages. I considered it briefly, but I was a 28-year-old teacher in a small town, and she was my mother. The legal system wasn't built for this kind of wound. But I kept everything, every voicemail, every email, every screenshot, filed neatly in a folder Rachel had labeled just in case. We didn't get rich, we didn't get even, we just got free. 3 months later, our house is small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a porch that needs repainting. Nathan says he'll get to it in spring. I believe him because the man finishes everything he starts. I go back to teaching. The 3rd graders don't know anything about what happened, and that's exactly how I want it. They care about multiplication tables and who gets to feed the class hamster. It's the most grounding thing in my life. Mrs. Daniels, the teacher who whispered, "Don't let her win" in the hallway that day, starts leaving a cupcake on my desk every Friday. She never mentions why. I never ask. Gloria Cole and I have dinner together every other Sunday. She's teaching me to make peach cobbler. The Cole family recipe, handwritten on an index card so old the ink is fading. Last Sunday, she handed me the original card. "It's yours now," she said. "Family recipe goes to family." I taped it inside our kitchen cabinet, next to a photo of Nathan and me at Elmwood. I haven't spoken to my mother directly. Uncle Tom is the bridge. He tells me she started seeing a therapist. Went twice, quit. Went back, quit again. Then went back a 3rd time. "She's trying," Tom says on the phone one evening. "Slowly." "Slowly is fine," I tell him. "I'm not going anywhere." I mean it. The door I described in my letter, the one that opens from my side, is still there. I check on it sometimes in my mind, the way you check on a plant you're not sure will survive the winter. I don't need my mother to be perfect. I just need her to stop pretending I'm broken. That's the minimum. And for the first time, I'm not afraid to hold it. I want to say something to you directly, not as a character in a story, but as me. Vera. I didn't tell you all of this so you'd hate my mother. She's a woman in pain. She lost her husband too young, and she never learned the difference between holding on and holding hostage. Her fear is real. Her grief is real. But her pain doesn't give her the right to destroy my life. And yours doesn't either, whoever yours is. If you have someone in your life, a mother, a father, a sibling, a partner, who uses love like a leash, who makes you feel guilty for being whole, who punishes you for growing, I want you to hear me. You are not ungrateful for wanting air. You are not selfish for saying no. You are not a bad daughter or a bad son for building a life that doesn't orbit their anxiety. Boundaries are not walls, they're doors, and you get to hold the key. I didn't plan a revenge, I didn't scheme, but I was lucky. I had Rachel. I had Nathan. I had Uncle Tom and Gloria and Mrs. Daniels and 200 people who showed up at a backup garden on a Saturday in Georgia because someone sent them a text that said, "Trust me." If you don't have a Rachel, if there's no one in your corner right now, then be your own Rachel. Make a plan, not a plan for revenge, a plan for your future. A plan that protects the version of yourself that your mother or father or whoever is trying to erase. You deserve to exist without permission. I know because I spent 28 years waiting for permission. And the day I stopped asking was the day my life actually began. 6 months after the wedding, I came home from school on a Tuesday afternoon. There was a piece of mail on the porch, not in the mailbox, on the porch, hand-delivered. A cream-colored envelope with no return address. My name written in handwriting I would recognize in the dark. I opened it standing in the doorway. No letter inside. No words. Just a single pressed wildflower. A black-eyed Susan, flattened and dried between 2 sheets of wax paper. I held it for a long time. A wildflower. The flower I had chosen for my wedding. The flower my mother had replaced with white roses. The flower Rachel had brought back. I don't know if it's an apology. I don't know if it's a goodbye. I don't know if she pressed it from her own garden or bought it somewhere or picked it from the roadside ditch out on Route 12, where black-eyed Susans grow wild every summer. I don't call her. I'm not ready. Maybe she's not ready either. I carry the flower inside and place it on the bookshelf, leaning against our wedding photo. Nathan and me under the live oaks. Fairy lights in the background. Wildflowers everywhere. My mother didn't say anything. And maybe that's the kindest thing she's done in years. Nathan comes in from the workshop, sawdust on his forearms. He sees me standing at the bookshelf. "You okay?" "Yeah," I turn around. "I'm good." Through the kitchen window, the late afternoon sun pours across the backyard. I can hear the rhythm of Nathan's table saw starting up again. The neighbor's dog barking. A mockingbird somewhere in the pecan tree. My name is Vera Westbrook Cole. I'm 29 now. And for the first time, my life is mine.